Good morning. Good Friday morning. To those of you who only work 5 days a week, congratulations. And today is your last day to go to work this week. To those of us who work seven, pretty much, it's just another day. But it's going to be a beautiful day. And I think we're almost on spring here in Oklahoma. I think this yesterday was the last really cold day. We might have another one here and there, but hopefully winter is past and spring is on the way. That's what I'm hoping. I'm ready for spring. I'm ready to walk outside around the apartment 100 times to get my mile in every day. We're 2 miles in every day, however many, ready to get Chris back out to Martin Park and Lake Hefner and Red Rock Canyon, and I got plans. We're gonna have lots of vitamin D therapy this year, so it's nice. Get some, right? Anyway, hope you're having a great day. I'm sorry I'm a little bit late. It just Chris had me up about 4, and it depends on when he wakes me up in the night as to how deeply I go back to sleep and how easily I wake up. So I woke up with one eye about 7 and clocked in for the aid thing, and then the next thing I knew, it was almost 8, and I'm actually just now making my coffee. I ain't even had coffee. So anyway, but I hope you're having a great day. I hope you're having I hope you've had a good week, and it's always onward and upward. So yesterday, we talked about the prison. We talked about the children of Israel and how they were imprisoned to fear, and how that drove so many of their emotions and things like that, and how they could have at any time gotten out. And my thinking went two directions. One was God just sent one person to get them. That just blows my mind. He didn't send an army to go get them. Matter of fact, they didn't even fight at all. He sent Moses, talked to Pharaoh. God did the fighting. Then he took the children of Israel out of there, right? But he only sent one. I mean, and Moses was like, he's like, I can't do it by myself. So God let Aaron go help too. But God only sent Moses, one person, to get 1 million people out of bondage. That's my thinking is still just on that, and I don't know what will come of it. Maybe I'll get a lesson somewhere, because I started thinking about Gideon and how God said, well, your army's too big to beat an innumerable host of army. You've got too many, and he shucked him down to about 300, and they still won. See, God never sends anybody into battle to lose. You ain't gonna find anywhere where he says, just go fight. Y'all are all gonna die. I'm so sorry. That's just the plan. He always plans, like Jeremiah 29:11, a very popular scripture. He always plans for a future and hope. And so with that in mind, I started thinking about there's 3 stories came to mind where people ended up in prison. Okay. And the first one, of course, is Joseph. We talk about Joseph a lot. God's plan was never to leave Joseph in that prison cell. And he didn't. He elevated him, and he ended up running the whole country. He was second only to the Pharaoh, or whatever the king was in charge. He was second only to him. He ran the whole country. That's why he was able to go get his people and bring them up and give them the land so that they could farm and herd sheep and things like that. So because God elevated him out of that prison. God didn't, now God's plan happened even though Joseph spent that stint in prison. Even though things looked really bleak, things looked really bad, things looked really dark, God's plan didn't change. Second one that came to mind is Paul and Silas. We've talked about them a few times too. In Acts chapter 16, they were beaten and put in jail, and that it says at midnight they were praising God, and God shook the place with an earthquake, and all the doors came open. They could and the chains fell off. They could have ran out and not thought about anybody else, and we'd have still had a great story how God opened the prison doors and they escaped. They stayed and saw the jailer and his whole house saved. They saw a whole community saved from that prison cell. But God's plan wasn't to leave them in that prison cell. And I think about that prison cell and how dark it must have been. I mean, I'm sure probably the jailer had a torch, but they didn't have night lights and flashlights, y'all, back then. There wasn't no battery charged anything. There wasn't no street lights, right? It was probably really, really dark. But God didn't ever plan on them staying in that prison. The third one that came to mind, and there may be some more, maybe you can think of some more. Send me a message. We'll talk about them tomorrow. More material. This thing's full of material to build our faith, right? The third one I thought of was Samson. And Samson disobeyed God. and ended up in prison with his eyes poked out. He literally did the opposite of what God said. God said, don't tell anyone, don't cut your hair. And he let Delilah, swoon him away. And, he got all how guys do. They get soft for a woman and they throw everything away because they want that prize. He disobeyed God. He told everything he knew, and then they captured him and put him in prison, all from hate and their fear, right? But here's the thing: at the very end of Samson's life, they had gouged out his eyes. Isn't that a horrible thing? I can't even imagine, right? Oh, I just can't even imagine. Anyway, the things he went through, and so they take him. They were making fun of him. That he was their entertainment. How sad! Such a sad story. However, at the very end, Samson tells this little guy that's leading him, because he's blind, he can't see, he doesn't know his way around the big Colosseum they were in, or whatever it was called. And the guy put him close to he says, take me to the pillar. I just want a feel of the pillar. Yeah, right. He goes, okay. So he stood him over there, and Samson's strength had returned, because God's promises don't go away when we disobey. God's promises don't change because we're in prison. Even if it's a prison we kind of self-inflicted upon ourselves by disobeying, or Joseph didn't do anything wrong and he ended up in prison. Paul and Silas didn't do anything wrong and they ended up in prison. Was it Paul and Silas? Yeah. But Samson did something wrong and ended up in a prison, and yet God still fulfilled the promise He'd made for Samson's life, even though Samson messed up. He was the one that messed up. God didn't mess up, and it says in his death he wiped out more than he had ever done in his life, because he pushed on those pillars and they caved in. The whole, you look at some of the rubble around Turkey, and that Colosseum looks like that. It caved in because he had his hands on the pillars of the building, the support pillars, and it brought the whole thing down, and they all died. So he killed more. And so God still, my point is, God still fulfilled what He promised about Samson, and promised Samson, even though Samson thought for sure he had messed up. He fulfilled everything He ever said about Joseph, and Joseph didn't even mess up, but he thought his life was messed up. God continued to use Paul and Silas. God never plans on us staying in our prison, whether it's there by slavery, whether we have enslaved ourselves through fear, through doubt, through disobedience. None of those things are stronger than God's plan. So no matter what you're dealing with, and hopefully it's not anything as serious as some of these guys, God's got a plan. He's still got a plan for future and for a hope for you. The plan is still intact. It didn't change. He never looks at it and goes, oh, now what? He never looks at it and goes, oh, I didn't know they were going to do that. Or, oh, where did that come from? No, his plan stays intact, even when our faith doesn't. God's plan is still intact. He never changes His mind. He told Abraham, your descendants are going to go down to Egypt, and they're going to be in bondage there for 400 years, but I'm going to go get them. And Joseph believed that so much, when he died, he said, look, Abraham's promise was that we weren't going to die here, that God's going to send a deliverer. So make sure you take my bones with you because I'm fixing to die. Make sure you take my bones with you back to the promised land when God comes to get you. God always has a plan of deliverance. He always has a plan of redemption. He always has a plan. And all we got to do is just hold on to that, make our faith match that, and just know that He never leaves anyone in a hole. He never leaves anyone. No stories that we have in the Bible said God just left them there and let them rot. Oh, well, forget the plan. No, you're not going to find it anywhere where God changes His plan. His plan is always for a future and hope. So I don't care how good it looks right now or how bad it looks right now. He can send one person to deliver 1,000,000. He can send 300 to beat a whole army. He can send Paul and Silas to save a whole city, right? God's got a plan, and He's not going to abandon it. You ain't big enough to mess up God's plan. You're not bad enough to mess up His purpose. It still stands for you today. All we got to do is just trust Him for one more day And peace out. He's got it. So peace out. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.